Welcome to Buckeye Weekly. Obviously, I'm not Tony Gerdeman. I am Kevin Noon. I'm joined by Mark Gibler here in this special live edition as lights keep going on, off and on behind me, as I'm not at home, obviously. I'm at a brewery. But since this is Buckeye Weekly, Mark, how you doing?
Uh, Doing good. Busy times right now. Coordinator searches and O-line coach searches and catching up with recruits seemingly every day about their reactions to a coaching change in Columbus. So we're going to try and figure this out. I think this is an interesting one. Not that it was out of left field, but I think that people had thought they had kind of dodged the bullets on this. Chip Kelly to the NFL was a thing that was going to be possible this offseason. And it looked like, again, as the NFL openings were kind of closing out and staffs were filling out, that perhaps Ohio State had dodged a bullet here and would get Chip Kelly back for another year. Obviously, that's not happening. He's going to the Raiders, as reported by Adam Schefter, Pete Thamel. There are obvious answers to, I think, the other questions. Like when you talk about the O-line opening or the D coordinator opening, I think we've had some obvious candidates for those. There aren't a ton of obvious candidates here. Now, I'm sure Ryan Day has an idea because he knows that this was going to be a possibility either this year or next year. He's got to replace Chip Kelly probably. But there's not this like surplus of, oh, this is definitely the guy. Like this is definitely who they'll go after, or here's 5 guys that make like a ton of sense. Like there's not really a great list right now, like right off the bat. That's something that we'll formulate here in the coming days.
Yeah, exactly. I think when you look at this, there were concerns initially about Jacksonville. There were concerns about Houston. And then concerns started to creep in a little bit about Las Vegas. And Jacksonville has been just such a weird situation. But then a trusted Houston reporter came in and really kind of relaxed the fears of everybody that it was going to be Houston. But Vegas always kind of remained out there as this outlier. It was always like, well, could Vegas swoop in? I mean, it's already kind of the old head tour. We're bringing in Pete Carroll. We're going to do all this stuff. Obviously Chip Kelly is not part of this 30-year-old Sean McVay coaching tree of anybody who's touched Sean McVay in any way, shape, or form. Suddenly, what's new is new. This is what's old is new. And, I think it came as a little bit of a surprise, especially happening here Sunday after 5 p.m. Eastern. Okay. Vegas, what I don't even know what the hell time Vegas is. They don't let you know what time it is in Vegas. I don't know. Are they Mountain? Are they Pacific? Does it matter? They hire him away, and now Ohio State is having to replace not only 2 coordinators but also an offensive line coach. You want to kiss the brass ring? This is what Nick Saban had to deal with like every year. This is what Saban had to deal with every year, and it's really easy to retain your coaches when you're not winning. Ohio State has never really had a case of where it wasn't winning. I mean, I guess we can go back to 11, 6 and 7, the fickle interim year or whatever. But when you become successful, all of your coaches are in demand. And I'm not saying that I'm expecting any other coaches to jump ship, but would I be completely surprised if somebody else got hired away? At this point, I'm going to say no, because we're in a brave new world.
Yeah, I mean, this is the cost of doing business. If you want to win national championships, schools and NFL teams are going to poach your coaching staff. I mean, that's just how this works. It's going to be interesting to see what direction Ryan Day goes with this specific hire, because this one impacts Ryan Day, the football coach, the human, more than a defensive hire or even an offensive line coach. This is the guy on staff that Ryan Day will work closest with. I thought Chip Kelly did exactly what he was brought in to do this year. They win a national championship. He had a great playoff run, called some great games. And Ryan Day knew this was not going to be a 5 or 6 year thing, but it's going to be interesting to see, like, Day probably wants to try and replicate this in some way, shape, or form in terms of bringing in a really high level offensive mind so that he doesn't have to be so hands-on with the offense. And so that's going to be the interesting thing to me to watch, is kind of how he handles this opening. And, as I said on Twitter yesterday, when there were only 2 openings and now there's 3, one of the underrated things about Ryan Day's tenure at Ohio State is he's done a pretty good job with assistant coach hires. Like, has everyone been money? No, but I would say he's batting a higher than average percentage on his assistant coaching hires. I think he's done a really good job of that. And that's an underrated trait in a college football coach. We saw Urban Meyer really struggle with this toward the end of his tenure at Ohio State, hit some home runs early in his career at Ohio State. But then we got, Bill Davis and Grinch, and we got a whole bunch of, got Taver Johnson 2.0. We got a lot of stuff there we didn't like at the end of the Urban Meyer era. So this will be interesting. And I already see in the comments from Chip there, Kevin Wilson. This makes sense to bring back. This makes more sense now than it did even 24 hours ago, I think, to possibly bring Kevin Wilson back. It doesn't even necessarily have to be in an offensive coordinator role. It could simply be to be the O-line coach, like an O-line coach, run game coordinator type of thing. Because now you've got 2 spots open on offense, and Kevin Wilson is a really good offensive line coach. Is he an elite recruiter? Do I think he's like an elite? No, I don't think he's an elite recruiter, but I don't think he's a bad recruiter either. So how would you pair him with, either an O-line coach hire or an offensive coordinator hire, depending on which role you would hire Kevin Wilson for? So that's an interesting situation to me, but Kevin Wilson would make some sense here in some way, shape, or form.
I'm going to put a couple questions in the queue right now. I want to address something right now. People think like I'm at the Kennedy Center. I was out having a day on my own, away from the site. One of our great sponsors who helped us during the bowl coverage, Grateful Griddle, is out here at Standardized Brewing in Lewis Center, Ohio. I came out here to support them, brought some friends out here to support the food truck, and of course the brewery, because you can't, cheers. But this was not planned. The fact that I bring a computer with me is the fact of I know that the Ohio State beat is every minute of every day of every year of your damn lifetime. So I am putting in overtime right now. This is time and a half because I love y'all so much right now. So that's why this is the only room I could find that was not super loud with music blaring in the background and ceiling fans and everything else. So hopefully I've addressed that point to the 500 plus people we already have in this chat here at this moment. So we're done with that. I will readdress it as people ask there, but let's get to the Kevin Wilson point. Mark says in the last 24 hours. I'm going to say in the last 240 minutes. I mean, because while there was always the concern about this move, about Chip Kelly eventually, moving on. And again, I talked about it. I'm going to close my email program so I quit getting emails of people panicked asking me about this. This wasn't going to be an in-game move for Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly was not going to retire as Ohio State's offensive coordinator. I did see it lasting longer than a year. Oh, I need to take a 20. I need to relax. I need to get back into the purity of coaching and everything else. I didn't think it was going to happen immediately. Well, it's happened. There's no reason to relitigate that at this point. He's gone. He's gone. That's fine. Pete Mel, excellent job of reporting. Pete's a friend of mine, so whenever he reports something, I know. I don't even question it. It wasn't like last night when Shams had the Lakers trade with the Mavs and everything else, and everybody's losing their heads over, is this real? Has he been hacked? I'm like, I don't think a hacker is going to be this detailed. But enough of that. Let's get to the Kevin Wilson thing. There is a certain extent of what makes sense there, but we're looking at Ohio State being in a situation where we're replacing both of its coordinators. Ohio State, obviously, this is the hot job, or hot jobs, plural. Ohio State should be able to go out and do full national searches. Now, if Ohio State decides that it wants to hire Matty G or Tim Walton or both as co-DCs or whatever, that's fine. If Ohio State decides that it wants to sit there and bring in Kevin Wilson in that situation, that's fine. What happens though if they don't bring in a coordinator to where Ryan Day's like, well, I'm going to cede control of playing of play calling and starts play calling again? Do we go back to a situation of where we were just a couple of years ago?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to. Ryan Day's got to be very careful in terms of finding the right two candidates here, because they're likely going to have to work together in some capacity, whether it just be as O-line coach, run game coordinator, or even co-OCs, which the labels thing is whatever for me. They may go co-OC. Again, Hartline, I think, has a title in his deal too. So it's like, I don't get too wrapped up in that. My concern is like, who's actually calling the offense? Who's in charge? Because someone's always in charge, even if there's 3 co-coordinators and whatever, run game and pass game and assistant to the head coach and all the nonsense they make up so that it looks good on a resume, or it looks good to some, accountant at Ohio State who's, justifying the raises and everything else. But they're going to have to find 2 guys who I think will have to complement each other well. They'll have to be able to work together. So you're going to factor that into your hires as well. I would not do the in-house thing with the offensive staff. I think Brian Hartline's very good with where he is right now. I don't know that trying to turn him into a play caller at this point is necessarily the best thing for everybody. Does Kevin Wilson, again, we have these questions with Kevin Wilson. It's like, look, does he just come in and save the O-line? Because that's an easier task. Come in and just focus on the O-line in the run game, recruit these guys, these Ohio guys that we've already started building relationships with, blah, blah, blah. Then having Kevin Wilson come in and be like, hey, Kevin, we kind of changed a lot of what we were doing after you left, and now you need to jump back into this. And by the way, you need to call play. I don't know that that's actually the best decision to make right now. I think Wilson maybe as O-line coach would make some sense. But I think they're going to have to go outside here. I think they could stay in house on defense. They've got young guys. Matt Guerrieri's got defensive coordinator experience. He's a young up-and-comer. Tim Walton's got defensive coordinator experience. He's obviously very well respected. They can do a lot of things in-house on defense, but for me personally, I think they should really take some big swings outside of the box at offensive coordinator, very similar to what they did a year ago with Chip Kelly, which was very much an outside of the box type of way of going about things. But that's going to be the $1 million question that we have to answer here, in the next few days, at least, as we start to see what the strategy might be. I don't think they'll have a hire in the next couple of days. I could be wrong. I don't think we'll have an offensive coordinator hire in the next couple of days, but I think we'll at least be able to, take the temperature of this and kind of what the strategy is and what they're kind of looking for. So we'll see. We'll see what they do.
I'm punching a lot of comments through, a lot of questions through. We're not going to get to all of them, obviously. This is not a show we planned for. We didn't have any pre-show notes or anything like that. Mark popped up. I'm like, you ready? He's like, yep. And I hit go. So that's kind of where we are at this point. But I'm going to dovetail off a question. Somebody was concerned about what this means for recruiting, but I'm gonna change this a little bit. How different of a world would we be in if it wasn't an early signing period and we were a couple of days before the only signing period? Ohio State, the hay's in the barn. The class is signed. But how different would things have been if this would have happened and nobody was signed at this point, and how things could potentially fall apart? I mean, yeah, you have your Tavian St. Clairs, you have your Turbo Rogers, all guys that look like they're pretty locked in, but you lose your OC all of a sudden. This could have been disastrous.
Yeah, I think obviously there's far less to worry about in today's climate than there would have been just a few short years ago when you didn't have that early signing period. But, with that being said, they haven't lost their best recruiters. And that means something. I think if we ranked the staff, the assistant coaches, 1 to 10 or whatever. I think all three of the coaches, I think they lost 3 very good football coaches, but I think they lost 3 of their bottom 5 recruiters on the staff. I really do. I think if we started to play that game on the best recruiters on the staff, I think
I just lost your audio there.
I don't know why that. I think we just would have said we'd go 5 or 6 names down the list on the current staff before we get to one of the 3 guys they've just lost in terms of recruiting on the staff. So but coordinators are a big deal. I can see why that would obviously cause some questions from recruits about what direction the team is going offensively, defensively. Like, are you going to change anything? And what's this all going to look like? So I think that would have been the biggest questions. It's not like Chip Kelly and Jim Knowles had like these amazing like recruiting relationships established.
The weeb in our anime and gaming videos is Kevin streaming from the Burger King boiler room. First of all, I would never be caught in Burger King. And second of all, if I'm in the Burger King boiler room, it means they're there to sacrifice me to the gods. No, I am at Standardized Brewing in Lewis Center. I am up here to support one of our great sponsors, Grateful Griddle. I had to think about that one for a second. I have not had that much beer. Obviously, I have to drive back 40 minutes to Pickerington, so that's not going to be the world. I was not given the opportunity to do that with the breaking news. Once again, Buckeye Huddle, we're going to be there when the news is there, whether it's Mark and myself, Tom and Tony, any combination of us, we're going to be there when the big news breaks. But yeah, it certainly does look like I'm here where they're ready to launch the missiles or something like that. But I can assure you, it's not DEFCON 1, even though it may feel like DEFCON 1 for some Ohio State fans. Losing 2 coordinators in essentially a week. I mean, but again, as I stated, this is something that Nick Saban's had to deal with. I think that even going back prior to that, Pete Carroll had to deal with it. It's if your team is a perennial 8-4 team, pre-bowl game, you're not going to have a huge run on your coordinators. Even going back to an all-time great like Jim Tressel. Jim Tressel largely was able to keep his staff intact. I think as history continues to move forward, you're going to see it's because Jim Tressel did everything. And that's not to say that he didn't have some coordinators that were really good. I will still die on the hill that Darrell Hazel was a great wide receiver coach. And he had some success at Kent State with Dree Archer. And then he had 0 success at Purdue, but that's Purdue. So it's kind of crazy how all that happens, but it's a trade-off. You have success as a program, people are going to want your coaches, but it's part of the natural progression. And it's a lot better than being in a position of, well, how do we move on from, I hate naming coaches here, but they're grown-ups, so they're going to get it, Parker Fleming or somebody like that. You just have to do that. How are you going to move on from Corey Dennis? I mean, and, both of them were very good to me. I mean, I think I consider both of them, at least professional guys that I've dealt with. I don't have any issue with them, but sometimes you've got to move on. And now you win the national championship. You put together a 4-game run like crazy. Everybody's going to talk about the 3-game run of 2014. Well, this 4-game run very well may trump that. So just the fact that both coordinator positions are open, there are a lot of people that are ready to sell. Somebody talked about, the futures dropped 500 points, nothing right tonight. I mean, there are going to be people who are going to be hugely concerned. Ohio State's not lost a single player. Ohio State has not lost its head coach. Ohio State's not lost any of that. But Ohio State in the last, whatever it is, 7 times 24 hours has lost both coordinators.
Yeah, I think I saw some of the recruiting comments. Something about a bunch of top end guys are going to decommit. I mean, that's just not going to happen. They've got their 2025 class signed, and their 2026 class so far is Jacob Weatherspoon, defensive back, who again both DB coaches are still here right now. Corbin Fordham, tight end. Keenan Bailey's still around, and then 2 wide receivers. Brian Hartline is still in Columbus. So the idea that there's going to be this immediate just departure of players, I think is just panic. There's Brady Edmonds out there in 2027 as your quarterback. I'm sure he's going to want to see who they hire and be kind of kept in the loop on that. But again, quarterback recruiting has very largely been a Ryan Day production. Brady Edmonds grew up wanting to play at Ohio State, so it wasn't like he grew up on the West Coast and just idolized Chip Kelly at Oregon or something, and that's why he went to Ohio State. He actually grew up an Ohio State fan. So I think everyone can kind of pump the brakes a little bit on recruiting. What will need to happen is I say this glass half full, I guess you can call it, but it's the reality. If ever you were to have to replace your coordinators, you'd want to be doing that at the beginning of February. None of these kids can visit anywhere. So you're not losing ground. It's not like, oh, while we're sitting here twiddling our thumbs trying to figure out who our coordinators are, all of our top recruits are visiting Georgia and Alabama and Texas and USC, Oregon. They can't go anywhere. So all recruits are barred from visits this month. So what you have to do now is you've got to fill these spots over the next couple of weeks. You've got to get these guys on the phone with your top targets. And then you've got to get these kids back on campus in March for spring ball, whatever, to sit down with the new coaches and reconnect. And so the fact that you're able to do this during a time when they can't be out visiting other programs does buy you some time. It buys you some time. It buys you some leeway here where, again, Max Riley, for example, big-time offensive lineman from Avon Lake. Max Riley can't go visit Clemson next weekend and get caught up in the emotions of it and commit to Clemson next weekend. Like, he could commit to Clemson over the phone, but he can't do the visit, like the junior day visit, and get all wrapped up and meet with the coaches. And you're sitting there and you don't know what to tell Max because you don't have an offensive line coach. And so, like, there's time. They can figure this out. They've done this before. They've replaced assistant coaches before. They've placed several assistant coaches before in one cycle. It happens. It happens a lot when you win. So again, see what the hires are here the next couple of weeks. Let those guys make their calls. This is where Ryan Day is important. Ryan Day is going to be on the phone with these recruits. Hey, I'm going to hire the best guy. You're going to love who I hire. I promise you, this is going to be fine. This is where Ryan Day comes in and can kind of contact these guys as well. So I think we're TBD on like recruiting impact in general in terms of, does it make some guys pause? Does it steer some guys elsewhere that are uncommitted right now that they're in on? Sure, it's not impossible that could happen, but the idea of just like rats jumping off a sinking ship that's being presented here by certain comments is just it's not going to happen.
And we're going to obviously overreact at this point because the thing is
because you don't know who's coming in, you don't know who the replacements are.
Well, you don't know who the replacements are. Ohio State pooped the bed against Michigan. Let's just be honest. They pooped the bed against Michigan and then suddenly put together this 4-game run in the playoffs of where everybody played at like 110%. And so there's obviously going to be a concern of, well, we're never going to get to 110%. And I want to welcome here in this room a couple of my fraternity brothers who we were out here. I brought them out to support Grateful Griddle. They're kind of watching, making faces at me. That's all well and good. It's part of being nimble as a remote production crew here with my laptop and my AirPods that have never fit properly in my freakishly weird ears. I don't understand that. But Fort Wayne Buckeye, Joe Moorhead, and that was a name before Bill O'Brien was hired and then departed after a couple of days, and then before Chip Kelly came in, that I was kind of on board with. I know Joe Moorhead was mentioned. I know Jason Candle was mentioned. Those were some of the names that were mentioned there. Obviously, there's going to be a recycling of some of these names, but Joe Moorhead kind of fits a lot, checks off a lot of the boxes, even though he doesn't necessarily have the, maybe the relationship with Ryan Day that obviously Chip Kelly did. I mean, a mentor is a mentor versus, just, another guy who's just a really good coach.
Yeah, and that's obviously like, look, can Ohio State get him a contract that would be in line with dollars and cents to what like Akron's paying him? Absolutely. To be the head coach. It would be more of a philosophical question with Moorhead is like, okay, do I want to continue to be a head coach, or, what do I want to do here? Because I know the Mississippi State thing doesn't sit really well with him. He's had some disappointments in his career. I know he really wanted this other chance with Akron, and we'll see. But I think certainly, this isn't a money situation. If we're talking about Joe Moorhead, I think it's just a matter of, again, Chip Kelly. It wasn't a money decision for Chip Kelly. It was a philosophical one. It was a happiness, personal choice decision. I think the same would have to be said of Joe Moorhead if that is a direction they try to go. But again, the pool of interested coaches for these jobs, these coordinator positions especially, should be some of the best in the country. I mean, you get to come in and you're working with these receivers they have, and they've got a good running back tandem, and you're going to get a bunch of experienced offensive linemen back. Like, if you're the defensive coordinator, you get to come back and work with Sonny Styles and Caleb Downs. Like, are you kidding me? So there's a lot here that should be enticing to candidates. So again, I think let's see what the temperature is like in the next couple of days. Let's see what the names we can kind of uncover are, or what the, even if it's not names, is Ryan Day kind of going to go to the NFL? Is he going to go, and I mean, go to the NFL for his OC hire, not leave for the NFL? Does he want an NFL guy to come in and be the OC? Does he want to stay in college? Is there some connection in college like he had with Chip Kelly? Is there a guy that would make sense there? I think that's what we'll be watching, especially the next few days. But I don't, my initial instinct is that it will not be Brian Hartline. My initial instinct is that they will go outside for the OC hire.
That's exactly where I was going to go. There are a lot of people asking about, well, why not Brian Hartline? Brian Hartline was promoted to the OC job for a year. Well, I think any of us who really kind of watched that season, and I'm not saying that to denigrate anybody, but it was pretty obvious that Ryan Day had a hard time letting that go. He did not let that go. That was not Brian Hartline calling plays. Brian Hartline has not called plays. You are the hunted at this point. You are the national champions. You're coming in week one. You're playing Texas. God damn it! I mean, you're coming right off the bat. You're not playing Central Texas, which isn't even really a school, but you're not playing Central Texas. You're playing the University of Texas. There's no ramp up. There's no build up or anything like that. I guess just to kind of dovetail right back into what you said, a lot of people who are very concerned about losing Brian Hartline, rightfully so. He is a savant in recruiting. He is a savant in wide receiver development. Does that mean he's a savant in being an OC still this young into his journey as a coach at the collegiate level?
Yeah, and someone said it in the chat just a second ago, and I agree with it. I think Brian Hartline's career path is more that of Urban Meyer's, which was wide receiver coach to head coach. Most guys can't skip the coordinator's phase. Hartline feels like the type of guy who can, and I'm not convinced that's not actually his goal, is to kind of take that type of path anyway. So I don't know. I would make sure every year Brian Hartline is the highest paid position coach in the college football for all I care. But I don't think this is the right time to try to truly try that experiment. You want to defend this title, admirably, and not saying they have to win the title next year, but you want to have a really good title defense next year. You want to make sure that you're not getting this. That's how, again, this is how things go off the. You make a few bad assistant hires, or you promote guys too quickly, or you do certain things, and that's when things kind of get away from you a little bit. But I agree, Christopher Sowers. I was actually asked this on the message board maybe a couple of days ago about if Chip Kelly left, and I said the guy who's available, who's not a head coach right now, I would call Will Stein from Oregon, and I would kind of give him a blank check. I think that would kill two. He's young, but he's called an offense. He's called an explosive offense at Oregon. and he doesn't. He's really been in charge of that offense because Dan Lanning's a defensive guy, and it would hurt Oregon. So I mean, I would offer Will Stein kind of a blank check. That's what I would do. I don't know if they'll do that. The other guy I really liked was Zach Kitley, who was at Texas Tech as the OC there, but Florida Atlantic just hired him to be the head coach there. So I would tend to think that's kind of a non-starter at this point. But
it'd probably get difficult to pull him after getting a head coaching job. And while Florida Atlantic isn't necessarily the top of the mountain at this point, God, what is this, like their seventh coach since Tom Herman in like 1 week? I mean, it seems like they're rolling that job over and over and over again. A couple of points. There are a couple of people who keep posting repeatedly, Ohio State's ship is sinking fast, which again which leads me to believe that this person is not an Ohio State fan who is believing that. I mean, we are still very much in the afterglow, laying there smoking a cigarette in bed after reaching the highest of pinnacles at this point. But, conversely, let's look at the dollar figures, because Ohio State was, even before any try and retain numbers, both Chip and Jim were both making 2.1. They got up to about 2.8 trying to retain Jim, which still was short of the 3.1 or whatever he got there. Let's just say that they have a pool of $6 million. Let's just say they're like, you always have to pay a little bit more. You have to pay up at this point. $3 million aside, we're not that far removed from Gene Smith saying, I am not in the business of paying assistant coaches $1 million a year. We are not a 7-figure school when it comes to that. Ohio State was very much on the forefront of being a $2 million school. And now, obviously Penn State has broken through the $3 million, but resources are not going to be an issue for Ohio State. Somebody's like, well, why would Will Stein leave Oregon to go to Ohio State? Well, money is one thing. And again, what's amongst friends, what's $200,000 or whatever. I mean, just amongst friends. I mean, it's a lot to take it. I promise you that. But with that being said, at Ohio State, you're probably in a better position in a lot of ways. And I'm not taking anything away from Oregon's recruiting. Oregon has kicked Ohio State's butt on several recruitments out there. But if I'm an offensive guy and I look at the offensive talent, especially on the line in Columbus right now, or in Ohio, I'm sorry. There's something to be said there. And obviously, nobody's having to sign 7-year deals to go be an OC somewhere. I mean, we're looking at coaches that have signed like longer term deals and are out after a year.
Yeah, I mean, it's the nature of college football right now is no one has patience. Coaches don't stay if they can move up the ladder. Schools quickly fire guys, move on. There's not a lot of patience in the sport right now, so you've got to be ready to kind of, get on your feet real quick and be on your toes and be ready to go out there. And Urban Meyer talked about it several years ago. I'm sure Ryan Day does the same thing of like you have to keep a list, even if you think that position's secure. Like Brian Hartline probably not leaving to go anywhere other than if he could get some really appealing head coaching job. But you should still have a list of 10 receivers coaches out there that if Brian Hartline leaves, you go down your list. And so I'm sure Day has that. But yeah, you gotta be ready to move because it's just, we're seeing schools eat tens of millions of dollars on buyouts. Like it's crazy what's going on right now.
Son of Sarek, does Larry Johnson leave too? Now, obviously, Larry is 72, 73. According to his Wikipedia, there's not a month in the year, a month and a date of when his birthday is, so we're not sure. Now, Larry is the ageless one. I mean, there's been a big question whether or not, hey, do you leave while you're on top? Do you sit there and do that? I mean, you don't have to like leave and completely leave. I mean, Tim Hinton has been within the program for years after he left his tight end coaching role. very pivotal in their development issues, in their camp programming, everything else. As I said 15, 20 minutes ago, and then I'll re-welcome everybody to the show after Mark's answer. A lot still could happen. We're not necessarily saying that after three coaches, it's like, well, we're done. We've seen all the movement.
No, I mean, because here's the thing: there's multiple cycles. You go through the college cycle, then the NFL comes in and they fire 7 head coaches every year, and those guys then they make those hires, and those guys have to fill out their staffs, and then they poach from other coaching staffs who then have to poach from places like Ohio. Like this, it's almost the ball just keeps rolling through February. It just keeps happening. Like there will be other changes that happen that will have a ripple effect. It's just one big domino effect across the entire coaching landscape. And so it's always hard to predict like who's going to stay, because oftentimes you'll say, oh yes, that guy's probably going to stay. And then 2 things happen that cause a ripple effect. And now a job is open that wasn't open when you thought they would stay. And now they're leaving. So I think that, again, that's what happened here with Chip Kelly basically. And, we'll see what they do. I think again, we get back to the Kevin Wilson thing. I see a lot of Kevin Wilson talk in the chat, like would make some sense. How much control are you giving him in terms of play calling though? I mean, that's the thing. If you trust him to call plays and you trust him to call plays, that's fine. But what I would not want to see happen is you bring in Kevin Wilson. You're not sure if you want him calling plays. And so Ryan Day goes, well, I guess I'll just call plays again. Well, let's not get back into that cycle. So we'll see what they do on there, but Kevin Wilson at minimum as like an offensive line coach, maybe a co-OC run game coordinator would make some sense to me. Again, would Will Stein leave Oregon? I have no idea, but like I said, I was asked the other day, what would you do? I said, well, I would call Will Stein and I would say, okay, we're going to make you the highest paid offensive coordinator in the country. What do you think? And so there's no, what's the worst you can do is say no. And then you, okay, thanks. And then you move on. But we'll see what type, Bobby Slowick's out there. I don't know. That one's, I'm mixed on that one. Young would be a play caller. There seem to be mixed reviews of him in terms of his time with the Houston Texans. So I guess I'm a little skeptical on that, but we'll see. To Sam's comment here, February is the best time for this to happen.
December.
Best time for this to happen.
I mean, if you don't,
December's the middle of the playoff run. December's the middle of transfer portal. Like, there's nothing happening in February. There's literally nothing happening in February. Recruits can't visit other schools. Like, you have no access to your team beyond just the occasional like meeting. They're in natural. Like, there's no practice going on. February is a great time to actually have to do this. The one downside would be that, like, yes, maybe some guys who you would have called have moved positions, but when has that ever stopped a coach from? I mean, we've seen coaches. I mean, you guys were here last year, right? We've seen Bill O'Brien come in as offensive coordinator and be gone in a week. Like, we've seen, so like if their guy has changed jobs this offseason, they can still go out there and coax him to come do this. So I don't think the timing's bad at all. I think it's never ideal to have to do this, but I think February is actually a very good month to have to do it.
All right, I'm going to punch up Connor's question. I'm going to get our comment. I'm going to get to that in a second. Got a laundry list of stuff to do right here, so bear with me. First of all, we're 39 minutes in the show. Thank you to the 1,100 plus people we have through YouTube, Facebook, Twitter X, joining us here on Buckeye Weekly Podcast. Again, no Tony, no Tom, but you got the A team here, so to hell with those guys. Second of all, wow, you've joined us here at a really exciting time of Buckeye Huddle. Ohio State's won a national championship. Obviously, a lot of stuff going on. We're not just sitting around resting on our rear ends, sitting at a brewery. Well, I am sitting at a brewery, having fun, drinking beer. I am drinking beer, so you're going to have to deal with all that. But what a time to join Buckeye Huddle. $4.99 for your first month. You can't even get like a crappy McRib for $4.99 alone, let alone a meal. That's like $9, $10. Um, I think we still have, I think we still have some national championship confetti that we are sending out to our members, old and new. This isn't a contest. This isn't a, well, sign up for a chance to win it. We are giving it to you. We are delivering it to you, putting it in the mail. We're even handling postage, for Christ's sake. I mean, how great is that to, to do? You're getting a chance to have that. $4.99 for your first month. Tom, Tony, myself covering the team. Mark destroying recruiting out there with Skull Session podcasts, talking to the kids, all of that stuff. Ross Fulton, everybody else that is out there covering the X's and O's. I was out here with Michael Pettit. He joined me out here at this brewery to join Grateful Griddle. We talked a lot of X's and O's out here. $4.99 for your first month if you're watching us on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. That helps us a lot. Hit the thumbs up, hit the bell. Don't miss a single episode. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcasting platform, write us a 5-star review. That helps us with our distribution. And of course, Grateful Griddle, check them out. We're doing some promotions with WagerWire. Check them out as well. And I think that's all of the commercials that I have at this point. Let's get to what Connor has. Street saying Randy Bates got the DC job. Now, I don't believe anything until I believe it. I've certainly heard his name mentioned. I certainly think that he checks off a lot of boxes. It does seem like it is a pretty quick move. If that's the case, I think you can get away with doing a national search. But, if that's the top candidate, and people are going to be like, well, Pitt's defense wasn't all that this year. Pitt is a school. Sorry, Pittsburgh. They don't like to be called Pitt. I mean, they vary from year to year. Oh, call us Pitt, call us Pittsburgh, whatever. Well, they are dependent upon what the talent is. And you can't necessarily replicate from year to year because you're not an upper echelon Power 5 team. But, Randy Bates certainly brings a lot to the table if that's the direction. Now, I don't necessarily know what his scheme is in terms of how he feels about the 4-2-5 versus the 4-3 and everything else. And somebody asking earlier about Larry Johnson, is he ready to retire yet? I don't know how all that works. But at least there's smoke on this one. That's all I can say.
Yeah, nothing official on a defensive coordinator hire yet. We'll see. At some level, Matt Guerrieri is going to be involved in this thing, whether he's DC or co-DC or something. There's going to be co-DCs next year, in my opinion, when this all settles. So what that means is really not much. It's really just one guy's going to get a raise and get the co-DC label and, whatever. So, but there will be co-DCs. And then we'll have to do the whole like Halfley, Madison, Schiano, and I don't forget who Schiano's co was, but we had Ash and Fickle, and like who's actually calling the defense. So we'll have an off season of debate on that, and then we'll have probably a full season of debate on that because people seem to not be able to agree on who was actually running the defense during the season with all those situations. But I suspect we're going to see Matt Guerrieri as a co-DC, and then we'll see what they decide to do with the other spot. Could it be Tim Walton too? I mean, do they just elevate Guerrieri and Walton? That's possible. So we'll see. Bates is a name that's been thrown out there, but there's been nothing concrete on that at this point.
Super chat, Quintucky. Thanks for all you do without the bullshit. I'm going to say it because it's my show, so I can say whatever. Somebody else has been angling for Barstool funding. So, hey, Quinn, I appreciate it. Mark appreciates it. We all work very hard to make sure that we can bring you. Of course, we want to get out ahead of the news as much as we can, but we also understand that we have a responsibility to base ourselves in reality. And I'm not speaking on anybody else at this point, and I'm only speaking for myself. And I would rather be second and right than first and wrong. So we're going to sit there and do the best that we can there. But we do this out of a labor of love. It would have been very easy for me not to answer my phone and continue drinking beer with my fraternity brothers. And I could probably be at my third bar by now. But I promise I will give everybody at least 16 more minutes to get to the hour mark. And we'll see. Our numbers are not going down is the reality. People are looking for news right now. And this is my JOB. And Mark doesn't realize I got a $300 expense report to turn in from the last 2 bowl games. So I better keep things going well if I'm going to get that paid to keep everybody happy. So I thank you, Quinn, for your super chat. I saw something else that I saw here. Somebody talked. Oh, Christopher Sowers. Base runs a 4-3 mix 3-4 with emphasis on pressure. Okay, sign me up to a certain extent, but again, Ohio State is, the last 3 years has been a 4-2-5. Everything else, I mean, Ohio State, I think, has a ton of strength in its secondary. I'm not wanting to take that fifth defensive back off the field. I mean, obviously, coming into this year, Sonny Styles, Arvell Reese, who's the third linebacker? Is it a Peyton Pierce? Is it one of the young guys? Is it Pettijohn? Is it Alford? What's the situation there? I'm not necessarily wanting to take DBs off of there. Sometimes you may have one mindset, but you have to kind of fit within the program until you can get the personnel there. So that's not uncommon.
Yeah, and look, I think to be a successful defensive coordinator in today's game, you have to be multiple. I don't think you can stubbornly just stick with 4 down linemen, 3 down. You have to be multiple. You have to be able to change your looks up, especially up front, move guys around the line of scrimmage. So it's, I think growing up, obviously teams were 4-3 or they were 3-4, and that's what they ran. And we all got into these things of, contextualizing everything in those terms of 4-3 or 3-4. And I just think today's game is a lot more multiple. So I think whoever they get is going to have to adjust to what the talent level is here, what they've been playing, and mix that in with what they like to do.
Following up on a comment from Terry Slusher, Alabama just in the last couple of minutes has been reported hired Ryan Grubb as its OC. So cross him off the list. That's the joy of doing live programming. When you're live all the time, you shouldn't be caught by surprise because you're on the air when this stuff happens. So I want to thank Terry for pointing that out at this point. We got that there. I put the link into the chat. So that one is done with. Let me just kind of,
that's good time. I know there's gonna be some people who look at that and kind of roll their eyes and be like, oh, why didn't Chip Kelly leave 3 days ago? Ryan Grubb, when Kalen DeBoer calls Ryan Grubb, that's kind of the end of it. They work together at Washington. That's not a guy. I think it's good to have him kind of out now. You don't have to make that call and then have Kalen DeBoer come in right behind you and maybe pull him away in the midst of negotiations, or God forbid, even a Bill O'Brien situation where you hire him and then Kalen DeBoer calls and says, well, I got this for you here at Alabama. I'll pay you more. And you're my guy and everything else. So it's not it's not the worst thing in the world that's been kind of, done before they even really get going.
Billy Tuesday jumping in with the Joe Moorhead. Again, I need to dig up. I think I did a hot board pre-Chip Kelly, maybe even pre-Bill O'Brien. And I should, that's the reason why you do hot boards, because you already have bios at the point. You only have to update a little bit at that point. The crazy thing is we're not even talking about the defensive side of the ball, but it's, I keep going back to the same point. And I think the fact that I keep going back to the same point means that there's some validity to it. This is just, life as, one of the, it's a first world problem. You're not going to sit there and have this kind of turnover if you suck. I mean, it's not where you live at. It's not, it's not the case there. Nobody is necessarily, lining up to get, Northwestern's offensive coordinator at this point. And sorry, Northwestern's OC, if you're watching, why? But secondly, I mean, it is what it is. But I mean, it just shows how well Ohio State, dealt with that. And somebody, I don't know, again, someone's asking, is this dude at work? It's Sunday. It's 6:40. I'm out. I brought a computer with me because I'm a responsible worker, and I know this is a 24, I don't want to say it together, but 24 hours a day, ... 7-day-a-week type of operation, and I need to be ready at this point. So it would have been very easy again for me to just be like, oh, I'm out having fun. I'm too busy right now. But I am here. And no, I am not in the Burger King boiler room. Never, never punch that up. Never. Terry Slusher, Phil Troutwine for the O-line coach.
Well, I did have a quick thought before I get to that.
Yeah.
You're talking about first world problems with I say this about recruiting all the time because people get they get a 5-star commitment or a top 100 commitment, and schools keep trying to poach and flip those kids. I say, well, if you have a bunch of if you have 20 commits and no one's trying to poach them, you got a bad recruiting class. And it's the same thing with the coaching staff. If no one's trying to hire your coaches away, no one was really trying to hire away Billy Davis. No one was really trying to hire away Greg Stajwara. No one was really trying to hire away Taver Johnson. So it's just like when you have good coaches, people try and hire them away. Phil Troutwine, it's a good thought. I wouldn't be opposed to that. He's Penn State's offensive line coach. Has Penn State's offensive line been incredible?
No.
It's gotten better lately. It's gotten better lately. It was better this year.
I would rather than pursue Joe Rudolph at Notre Dame.
Yeah, Joe Rudolph, phenomenal O-line coach. Certainly would be a guy I call. But Phil Troutwine would be worth a call. He's a good recruiter. Tim Drevno and Matt Guerrieri promotions. That's not I think Matt Guerrieri to me is at minimum going to be a co-DC on the staff next year. What they do with Drevno is interesting. I'm wondering if Chip Kelly's departure actually would hurt Drevno's chances. That's what I'm kind of curious about, because Kelly and Drevno have history, and that from continuity standpoint, that would have made some sense. Now you're hiring outside the box OC probably. Here's kind of my thing, as I've kind of talked this out over the past hour. Now that you have an OC opening, and Connor, I think you hit a typo there, but you and I are on the same page here. Wouldn't you want maybe to hire the OC first now that they're both open? Wouldn't you want to hire the OC first, know what he wants to do in the run game especially, and try and match that up with a new O-line coach? That's the other question Ryan Day is going to have to ask himself now.
Christopher Sowers, I was going to respond to just the text as we're closing in on 53 minutes again. An hour is about right. We could probably go for 3 hours or something like that, but I don't know if we're necessarily going to have any more questions. Let's keep this concise, and we're going to take several bites at this apple. I can promise you that. But let me find this. Tennessee O-line coach is a great recruiter. Yeah, he got David Sanders Jr., but I think that was a case of proximity in a lot of ways too. And I was hanging out on Tennessee boards after Ohio State eviscerated the Vols, and they were ready to launch him into the center of the sun. I think they would probably help him move.
Here would be my holdup here. He's won some recruiting battles. I've got it on pretty good authority. We're talking about the portal with a college coach the other day. We're talking about the transfer portal. And Tennessee was paying a lot of money for some pretty average offensive linemen in the portal, because apparently the thought in Knoxville right now is they only had 2 reliable offensive linemen coming back. And so how much of that do you where do you kind of who do you lay that at the feet of? But that kind of jolted me a little bit. So I don't know that I would necessarily go that direction. Now, if you're completely convinced that Glenn Ellerby is going to bring David Sanders with you, sure. But yeah. I don't,
sign me
right.
up.
I'm not sure I don't know. I would go that direction. I'm not sure.
All right, go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I saw Joe Rudolph. Joe Rudolph, again, I think is a really good O-line coach. He did a great job at Wisconsin too, so it's not just Notre Dame. There was a question about like him recruiting the parochial schools, and yeah, like you're not going to get maybe the same type of pool at a Catholic school as you would, when you're the O-line coach at Notre Dame. But he did a really good job at Wisconsin before that. He's got a very extensive resume, body of work. Matt Luke's another one I think's a pretty good coach. But
people have a bad image of him because he was the interim coach at Ole Miss, and Quinn, we're going to get to his super chat, I promise. He was the interim coach at Ole Miss. He was put in an untenable situation. He went to Georgia. He did pretty well at Georgia. And now he's kind of out there in the ether right now. I mean, he went away from there. He's been mentioned for several real positions. I think Matt Luke is like a dark horse. I really think Matt Luke would be a dark horse O-line coach. I mean, whether or not he could be an OC, I don't know if that's necessarily there, if that is a strength of his. But I would be aggressive in getting Matt Luke in some way, shape, or form because I think he's, I think there's something there, and he's rooted in the South, and I think that's important. Ohio State has done a good job of getting coaches that have ties into Georgia or Florida or Texas. But as the Deep South becomes more and more open in terms of recruiting, and Ohio State has not necessarily been involved in Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, I think Matt Luke does give you some ends there. Super chat from Quinn Techie. I swear by the credo, quote unquote, always be best in market, not first to market. And it's funny because I'm sitting here and he's maybe almost out of earshot. One of my fraternity brothers, who's one of the best entrepreneurs I know. This sounds like some bullshit right out of his mouth right there. I mean, it really does. But yes, always be best in market, not first in market.
Can't argue with that. Again, I think making sure you're going through the process of what Day is looking for and not just whatever knee-jerk hire people want to happen, and go ahead and again, especially with these coordinator jobs, especially with the offensive coordinator job, like with all this talent they've got coming back, it's like, look, this should be a job that a lot of coaches want. And so there shouldn't be a shortage of candidates. Like they've got this is the most experienced offensive line that they have had in a while. I think if you look up and down the lineup, 1 through 7 on their offensive line, you're going to have a lot of starts there, a lot of guys with meaningful experience there. And then of course the weapons are ridiculous. So like, I just think that they're going to be able to come up with a really good hire offense. Like there has to be a guy out there that Ryan Day just can. And I even saw Tom Herman out there. Like, look, Tom Herman was very good to me when he was in Columbus. Went through some stuff, obviously well-documented stuff with the Ohio State coaching staff. I don't know if that would ever be a welcome back situation. I don't know, but I do think he's a good offensive coordinator. So even that would be a guy. I mean, again, would that be palatable for everybody involved? Have enough people moved on? There's a new athletic director now. Like Urban Meyer's no longer, around with the program really. Like, has enough stuff happened there? That's not for me to say, but I do think he's a good offensive coordinator.
Christopher Sowers, we were already commenting on J.J. Smith's reaction to Chip leaving. Now, I've not seen it. Obviously, Mark and I have been in here in the chat with you. As I'm sitting here in the brewery room over here at Standardized Brewing, I've not had a chance to really surf around. Has Brian Hartline disappeared yet? No. Has Ryan Day disappeared yet? No. Obviously, Ohio State is going to have to renegotiate with J.J. Smith on what his deal is. And I know that the number is large, and people were aghast that Ohio State spent $20 million allegedly on its roster and everything else. And, J.J. Smith is probably going to command, I'm not here to put false numbers out there, $1 million or something. I mean, he is, to quote Mark Gibler, probably 2 years ago, the dude is an alien. And if that's not the exact quote, it's pretty damn close to what Mark said. The dude is an alien. So I don't think there's any reason of why JJ should be that concerned that his world is going to change at Ohio State with the departure of Justin Fry or Chip Kelly. But yeah, and I don't think that was the heart of what Christopher was saying either. But everything is linked to everything else. So I know that's kind of where we're living.
Yeah, I look, of course, Jeremiah liked Chip Kelly. He liked playing in that offense, but his relationships with Hartline and Day, he's not going anywhere. The people going nuts about Jeremiah Smith's tweet, which is just simply a tweet that just says no with a heartbreak emoji. People are looking for reasons to panic at this point. It's what they do. They look for reasons to be upset. Not worried about Jeremiah Smith. He'll be in Columbus playing football in the fall. Brian Hartline's still here. Ryan Day's still here. Carnell Tate's still here. Remember that when Carnell Tate was going to leave too? That didn't happen. That's not even on my radar as something that would happen.
Well, we are here in an hour. I think we can go a couple more minutes. My buddy just grabbed me another beer, or is in the process of it. I want to thank everybody for joining us here at BuckeyeHuddle.com, YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle, here on the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. Again, I'm not Tony Gerdeman. He's not Tom Moore, vice versa. We're doing our best to carry the water as I have a new beer here. But again, we're not going to go too much longer because I probably should go back out to the Grateful Griddle and go get dinner or something. I didn't really plan on being here for 2 meals, but McChicken gives me Woody says we should go to 8. That ain't happening, sir. That ain't happening, sir. Our number exploded immediately and has stayed up there. So I know there are so many great viewers out there. We can't do this without you. So let me go through the quick buttons right now. Subscribe to the channel here at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. That helps us with our distribution. Hit the thumbs up. That helps us as well. That means you like what we're doing. Hit the thumbs down. Little secret, we still get credit for that, but hit the thumbs up. Hit the bell. Don't miss a single episode that we do. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcasting channel, leave us a 5-star review. That really helps us as well. $4.99, first month of Buckeye Huddle. You do that, you have a chance to get national championship confetti. I think we're getting down to the final batch of it, so I can't promise how much longer that's going to last, nor the $4.99 price. So get involved with that. Go on there, jump on the national championship confetti thread. DM Tom Orr. It's like, I want my damn confetti. Here's my address. Deal with it, and he's going to have to send it to you. So that's fantastic right there. But again, we can't do this without you. So I really appreciate it. I see the numbers going down as I'm sitting there trying to sell products. So I will shut up and get right back to what's going on. The big news right now: Chip Kelly off to the Las Vegas Raiders to work for the coach to work for the owner with the worst haircut, even worse than mine in all of professional sports. I mean, how shocked were you by all this?
Well, when you look at it, I'm equal parts shocked and equal parts. Well, this makes sense when you talk about Chip with Pete Carroll, because they were very much rivals at Oregon and USC, and that was a big thing. But the more I think about it, I say, okay, well, Pete Carroll's a defensive guy, so Chip Kelly is going to be in full control of that offense, full control of play calling. He's going to have all the keys to that. And the Raiders are in the market for a quarterback. May very well be drafting a quarterback. I would kind of advise against that in the top 10 in this draft.
You mean Gardner Minshew isn't their guy?
Right. But so Chip may have, Chip's walking into a situation where he can kind of have his input even on who the quarterback's going to be. So I think it makes sense for Chip, who is looking to get back into the NFL. I think it's a good spot for him. But we'll see. I mean, we'll see. The Raiders have been one of those franchises the last maybe 20 years that just recycled coaches and haven't been able to really figure it out. But I think this would make sense for Chip in terms of wanting to go back to the NFL and not wanting some offensive guru head coach in his ear all the time, which won't happen with Pete Carroll.
I'm going to jump right back into the Randy Bates conversation. James Monroe looks like Pitt's DC going to Ohio. First of all, it's Ohio State. Ohio is at Athens. Ohio State's in Columbus. Ohio State is your reigning national champion. But Nothing official as of the time that we were doing the show. Now, you might be listening to this on a rebroadcast and be like, well, wait a minute. Well, we are doing this at 6:58 p.m. Sunday, February 2nd, Eastern Standard Time at this point. Not heard anything official. That doesn't mean necessarily I have to wait for the university to tell us, but I have not been able to confirm it. But I've also spent the last hour and 5 minutes on a show here with Mark Gibbler talking about Chip Kelly departing the National Football League at this point. So, I just did a Twitter search really quick during Mark's last answer. I've not seen anything definitive at this point.
There's nothing definitive at this point.
It would be very shocking at 7 o'clock on a Sunday if something really kind of came out. Now, here's the reality. There are times where we will learn something, and it's like, oh, and the presser will be Monday, or the presser will be Tuesday, and we learn about it 2 days in advance. I can assure you, between the two of us, Tom Moore, Tony Gerdeman, Ross Fulton, everybody involved in the staff, we are all very involved. I've checked my phone 3 or 4 times during the show just to kind of see what messages I'm getting and everything else. But a lot going on right now. The coaching staff is not going to look the same as it did this past season. And of course, people will be like, well, it was, they won the national championship this year. So obviously this is a downgrade. They're going to be concerned. Jim Knowles is among the best DCs in college football. Chip Kelly obviously seemed to figure it out after the Michigan game. But let's also remember short-term memory. People were ready to launch Chip Kelly into the center of the sun after the Michigan game.
I was never more shocked by an offensive game plan than that. That's for sure. I thought Chip, again, I defended Chip throughout the year. I thought he had really good game plans against Oregon. They came up a point short. And I thought he had a really good game plan against Penn State, which some missed throws and some drops and things of that nature kind of blew up what I thought was a good game plan. So the Michigan game was Nebraska was just awful all over the place. But a lot of that, I think, was the revamped offensive line that just
they'd lost Josh Simmons in the Oregon
I don't
game.
know. I don't know any offense. I don't know if anyone would have been able to help them out that day with how bad.
Well, I mean, Zim Mahalski was not the answer at that point.
Right. So, I thought Kelly had a really good year, and then the Michigan game happened, and I was like, "What was that?" And then he just went on a tear the next 4. So, I think Chip's a good offensive mind. I fully endorsed the hire when it happened. It worked out for everybody. Ohio State got what they wanted out of it. But again, this is part of the reason why Ryan Day makes the big bucks is to go out there and put together a good coaching staff every year. And he's done a really good job. Has he been perfect? Has he batted 1,000? No, but he's done a really good job with his assistant coaching hires over the years.
I'll kind of end on this. And again, Super Chats will keep us on board. But we're going to try and cap this out at about hour 15. So we got about 8 minutes left, 7 minutes left. Putting the pressure on you. If you want to see our ugly mugs up here longer, you're going to have to pay for that. But Ryan Day goes on the awards ceremony tour, goes on the Tonight Show, goes on, it wasn't Rachel Ray, it was some other
Kelly Clarkson.
Kelly Clarkson show. He's tweeting pictures of Ohio Stadium from an aerial with 210. How many days it away they are from the Texas game? Are we seeing more of quote unquote dark Ryan? The Ryan that coached against Georgia, the Ryan that was, everything seemed to be much more right in front of you in the last 4 games. And, does losing 2 coordinators take anything away from that?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be the test he's going to have to go through is, okay, let's not revert to having to take too much of the offensive burden on his shoulders. So I think a lot of this is I think he's going to learn a lot from this last month of the season in terms of what worked for him and how they were able to get over the hump and the things he did to ensure that, and hopefully incorporate that into his next hire with the offensive coordinator hire. But it is interesting to me that, we talk about this a lot, but it's like, look, at the end of the day, what really happened? The guy who wins at the highest clip in college football finally put the wins together at the right time of year. Like it was kind of an inevitability. Like for me, like as we talked about this and people wanted him fired, the craziest thing to me was always, because I was called crazy for not wanting to fire him, and I thought, to me, the craziest thing was always thinking that it was more likely that you were going to find someone else to just come in and be the winningest head coach in college football by winning percentage than it was that you just keep the winningest coach in college football by winning percentage and think he's eventually going to win the right combination of games. Like, that to me was always going to be the more likely outcome. And so we saw that, and he got over the hump now, and now we'll see if he can duplicate, if he can replicate that. And, Kirby Smart was able to do it. Can Ryan Day do it?
I'm going to make a statement question. I'm not sure if it's going to come out with a question mark at the end or not. I haven't figured this out yet. And we're getting way ahead of ourselves. If Ryan Day leads Ohio State to another national championship this next year with a complete rebuild coaching staff, does that solidify him as one of the best to ever do it? Now, there's a lot of if. There is a blank ton of if in there, but if you go ahead.
He jumps like I don't care. Like if he wins a national championship next year, like if they repeat on the Ohio State list, I mean, a national list is always interesting. Like on the Ohio State list, he jumps Urban Meyer and Jim Tressel. Neither of them were able to retool their coaching staffs and win a second one. So he like immediately like slots in like behind like Woody Hayes, and then if you want to really like argue like Paul Brown or something crazy just because of what Paul Brown's accomplished in his career, but like to me he jumps Tressel and Urban immediately. But we'll see. I think look, there's a lot to do when you win. You've got to keep everyone's mind in the right place. You've got to replace key players. You've got to usually replace coaches. There's a lot that goes in it, and it's harder than ever now. Like, you got to win 3 or 4 games now in a row against great competition to do it. It's harder than ever to win a national championship. So I think I think a lot of fans around the country, I'm not talking about Ohio State, just Ohio State fans, like Alabama fans, Georgia fans, Texas, whoever, are going to have to recalibrate a little bit with a 12-team playoff that is far more likely to go to 14 or 16 than it is to go to 10 or 8 in the future, and kind of recalibrate like how often can you actually expect to win a national championship? Because it's getting much harder.
I'll remind people of this too as we're in our final couple of minutes, but we're going to give our goodbyes. Again, Super Chats will keep us here a minute or two longer, but if not, just keep it locked in here as we continue to cover all the breaking news. Let's not forget, after 14, they lost Tom Herman. Tom Herman, after the 14 championship, after they beat Oregon at Jerry World, was seen doing whatever the gang symbols were for Houston as he was doing that. So this is not something that is new. This is not like, oh my God, Ryan Day ran these dudes off or anything like that. It's somebody going on and having a better opportunity. Tom Herman was hired prior to the point of them winning the national championship. He stuck around to finish the job.
And the funny part about that is before when they were down pretty big in that game, before the Evan Spencer miracle pass to Michael Thomas, which still only like the greatest throws I've ever seen in terms of ball placement. There were all sorts of like posts and social media like, oh, Tom Herman's already off the Houston. They were like blaming Tom Herman for like how that Alabama game started. He's already in there with
Nobody
Houston.
hates Buckeyes.
He hasn't been game planning. He hasn't been doing anything. People were like ready to kill Tom Herman. That he was already had one foot out the door, and this, that, and the other. And then of course he puts together a tremendous game the rest of the way against Alabama, and a tremendous game against Oregon in the championship. But it's just funny. It's funny to these are not new challenges. Okay, like. These are not new challenges. We'll see these challenges resurface again in the future when they hire good coaches again and those guys move on. Like, this is going to be a thing. If you want to be a national championship caliber team, you have to replace assistant coaches.
My last comment that I'm going to sit there and jump in right here. You said you guys need a moderator. Again, this was not this was not a pre-scheduled show. Obviously, I'm not at home. If I had brew tanks in my house, It would be bad. And I just saw a super chat come in, so we're going to have to jump to that in a second. But if we had brew tanks in my house, I would be well preserved. I'm just going to say that at this point. We are talking about bringing in maybe somebody to be a moderator, but the reality is that moderator would have to be available for all of our shows. We run into it. Yes, we get a lot of background noise. So I understand what you're saying. I don't necessarily disagree. It is what it is. As long as somebody's not a complete a-hole, they're fine. If they become an a-hole, I try to ban them. Quintucky, who's been very generous in the super chat. So thank you once again, Quintucky. Was Chip Kelly auditioning for Tom Brady in the Michigan game? Was Chip Kelly auditioning for Tom Brady in the Michigan game? So obviously, maybe we need $10 because it was the same question twice.
Where's my tinfoil hat when I need it?
I could just sit there and do
Yeah, there you go.
I don't know.
Yeah, that is funny. That's funny. No, I don't think so. Maybe that made the interview go better, though. I don't know.
I was going to say, I mean, it's a lot easier, the path of least resistance. I certainly understand all of that. That, it's like, well, we just weren't able to get you, but we're going to sit there and be able to take it to the Chargers. Well, maybe not the Chargers with their fucking weird coach. Obviously, I've been drinking a little bit, so that F-bomb did not mean to come out there. But I should. Somebody just said, "OSU fans get a life." I don't even. All right, it's time to go. I think it's time to go. Mark, any final thoughts as we close out this show?
Just again, I think we have to look at now that the OC job is open. Does Ryan Day come in and say, okay, like I was looking at O-line options. Do I pause that until I get the OC thing figured out, because that could impact who the O-line coach needs to be. That's going to be my interesting thing now is the order of operations here.
I hear you. I think that, it's going to be interesting. I think that if we're sitting at Wednesday and none of the positions are filled, relax. It's fine. I think that there's more of a concern if they feel this rush to fill things out. Obviously, we talked about Ryan Grubb just taking the job at Alabama. I agree 1,000% with Mark said. Now it's a call you don't have to make. You don't have to deal with it. You don't have to sit there and be like, okay, well, we really like you. We're going to push all in on you. And only for the familiarity to come in and a matching offer to push you out of the way. So teams, if you win a championship and you lose your coaches and then suddenly go to the back of the line, you wouldn't have the best teams at the top all the time. So obviously there's a way to navigate this. This is still Ohio State. I think they're still in great shape. So it's going to be a really interesting ride. You're going to want to keep it locked in here at BuckeyeHuddle.com. $4.99 your first month. YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. All that good stuff. So until then, unless something else happens tonight, and I'm not planning on going back to Pickerington quite yet, so it better not happen tonight.
Don't jinx us here. Don't jinx us here.
I'm not jinxing us here. I'm not putting my computer away yet, but I'm going to have it in my bag. Until then, I want to thank you for watching us here on the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. It's Mark Kibler. I'm Kevin Noon. Thanks a lot, and have a great night.